A small Bosnian village. A night of celebration. And a boy who still believed the world was safe. It was Eid al-Adha, 1992. 14-year-old Elvedin Pazic was at home in the village of Hrvani, gathered with his family around the holiday meal. Before the war, Muslims, Serbs, and Croats there had lived side by side. For him, Eid meant new clothes, good food, and the comfort of tradition. That night began like so many others, warm light, familiar smells, jokes, and blessings. Then the first explosion shattered everything. At first it was just a distant boom, the kind of sound adults might brush off as training or thunder. But another blast came, closer, rattling the windows. The house shook. Faces changed. A moment later, the rattle of machine gun fire tore through the night. In an instant, Eid turned into a battlefield. Someone shouted to turn off the lights. Someone else yelled that the village was under attack. Fear rushed into the room faster than smoke. Plates were abandoned, prayers cut short, as everyone scrambled to move. Elvedin's father told the family to run. There was no time to pack, no time to decide what to save. They spilled out into the dark with their neighbors, joining a stream of people sprinting through yards and fields as Bosnian Serb forces poured fire into the village. Tracer rounds sliced the air. Houses began to burn. The night filled with the crack of rifles, the thud of shells, the screams of people tripping, calling names, dragging children by the hand. In that chaos, the boy was given a burden far larger than himself. A pregnant neighbor, struggling to move fast enough, pushed her little daughter toward him. She begged him to take the child and not let her fall behind, even if he had to pull hard enough to hurt, he must not let go. He grabbed the girl's hand and ran, that desperate command burning itself into his memory. Together they fled under fire, ducking when bullets snapped through branches, feeling the ground shake as shells landed too close. For a 14-year-old, fear and duty fused into one instinct: keep moving, hold on, don't lose her. They escaped that night, but not the war. For a time, the family moved wherever they could, hiding on the margins of the conflict. Months later, when they dared to return to Hrvani, it was almost unrecognizable. The village had been burned. Charred beams and collapsed roofs marked where homes once stood. The smell of ash clung to the air. Many of the elderly who had been too weak to flee had died in their houses, trapped and burned alive. Even small details carried cruelty. The family's dog, once there to greet them at the gate, lay dead, shot. It was as if nothing living that belonged to them was allowed to remain. With no way to rebuild or feel safe there, they were forced into a new kind of existence. Elvedin, his family, and others from the area hid in what he would later describe as something like a concrete pipe or culvert, a narrow, dark space that became their shelter for months. They slept on cold ground, listened to the distant rumble of artillery, and held their breath whenever vehicles or footsteps sounded above. Food was scarce. Each day was a calculation of risk: who dared crawl out, when, and in which direction, just to find a little to eat. In that tunnel, time blurred. Days were no longer marked by school or holidays, but by hunger and fear. After about 5 months of living like this, hiding and hoping not to be found, soldiers swept the area. One day, armed men discovered their refuge and forced everyone out into the open. They were not alone. Other families had been rounded up: men, women, children, the elderly. Under guard, the frightened group was marched along roads and fields. The sound of boots on dirt, the clink of weapons, low voices, and stifled sobs mixed into a numb procession. No one told them where they were going. Rumors whispered through the crowd, but no one dared raise their voice. At a certain spot, the soldiers gave an order that froze the column. Everyone was told to lie face down on the ground. The people were arranged in 3 long lines, bodies pressed into the mud, faces turned toward the earth. The cold seeped through clothing. Elvedin felt the weight of the person next to him, the tremor in his own hands, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might give him away. Above them, the soldiers' voices rose and fell, sometimes shouting, sometimes almost casual, as if this were just another task. Then came the command that would divide that group forever: women and children, stand up. For a moment, he did not move. At 14, he stood on the edge between childhood and adulthood, old enough to work in the fields, to understand danger, but young enough to still be under his father's care. He did not want to leave his father or his uncle, who lay beside him among the men. The thought of standing and walking away while they remained face down in the mud felt like a betrayal. Then he heard his father's voice. It cut through the chaos, quiet but firm. His father told him to get up, to go with the women and children, and that he would survive. His uncle repeated the order. They weren't asking, they were commanding him, as a father and elder command a son. In those few words, they told him what they could not explain, that staying with them meant certain death, that his only chance was to accept being separated from them in that moment. With his heart breaking, the boy obeyed. He rose to his feet and joined the group of women and younger children. When he turned back, he saw 3 rows of men still lying in the mud: his father, his uncle, neighbors, relatives, all motionless, their backs forming a pattern he would never forget. That was the last time he ever saw his father and uncle alive. Later, he would learn what had happened after the women and children were taken away. The remaining men were led to different places nearby: fields, edges of woods, sites already scarred by destruction, and shot. Around 150 men from that group were killed and left in shallow or mass graves. For years, families did not know exactly where their loved ones lay. The war turned fathers, brothers, and sons into names on lists and bones in hidden pits, waiting to be found. Elvedon survived, but survival brought its own burden. The war eventually ended on paper, but not in his mind. He grew older, carrying the memory of the Eid night when his childhood ended, of running through fire with a small hand in his own, of returning to a burned village, of months spent hiding underground, and of that line in the mud where a soldier's order separated the living from the dead. He lived with questions that never fully faded: why him, why that choice, what it meant to live because others accepted they would die. Years later, he walked into a courtroom in The Hague as a man, not a boy. The wooden benches, judges, lawyers, microphones, and cameras belonged to a very different world from the muddy field where his father had told him to stand up and live, yet they were part of the same story. He took an oath to tell the truth and began to speak. He told of the Eid celebration in 1992, the attack on his village, the neighbor's daughter whose hand he held, the burnt houses and murdered elderly, the months hiding in a concrete pipe, and the day they were forced to lie in the mud. He repeated his father's last words to him, explaining that they were both a farewell and a command to survive. The man accused of leading the forces behind such crimes sat only a short distance away as he spoke. The boy from Hrvacani, who had once pressed his face into the mud and tried not to tremble, now looked back on that day under the cold lights of an international court. Justice could not recreate his village or bring back his father and uncle. But by testifying, he ensured that what happened that night and in those fields would not be reduced to a line in a report. His story shows what war and hatred can do to a single family, a single village, a single boy. It is the story of a father's last act of love, sending his son away from him so that at least one of them might live, and of a son who carries those words forward, turning private pain into a warning the world can no longer ignore.